Now tonight, the details are still coming in. So to help us understand this situation is terrorism expert Dr. Jonathon White and aviation expert Gabriel Sanchez. Thank you both for being here with us tonight. Now, as you can imagine, we've all had our eyes on this. This is just such a tragic incident, but so much speculation as to how this could happen. So I want to start with you, Dr. White. First, we're hearing from the Ukrainian president, new president, saying already that he believes this is an act of terrorism. But when we look at this, we're talking about a Buk missile system. Now, this is a missile system that could target a target much higher than what Flight 17 was flying, which leaves you to believe this is obviously a military weapon. So could your regular terrorists, what we believe to be terrorists, have access to something like this?
Well, terrorists could have access to something like that, but
I guess you're conventional terrorists.
Yeah, in terms of probability, terrorists tend to use different types of weapons, and they would tend to use a shoulder-fired or man-pad missile. This takes a sophisticated support system to track and to fire. My guess, and this is just a guess at this point, is probably some of the irregulars who have the technical ability to fire it, but not the same discipline that the Russian military would have. But that's simply a guess and speculation.
And of course, there's so much of that right now. Everyone just trying to figure out how this could happen. Now, we spoke to you earlier at the top of the 5 o'clock show. You touched on as well is that, a lot of people, of course, with there being so much unrest over there right now, so many finger pointing, a lot of people right ahead say this, this is obviously an act from pro-Russian rebels. So you started to touch on that there's so much more going on over there than just the conflict that we've been seeing as of late. So what other groups are we looking at? What is the climate over there?
There is, with the Russian takeover of Crimea, there's a long history of Islamic repression in the Crimea that goes back to the Stalin era, especially the Tatars. And what could happen is a spillover from the Chechen area and another area in the Trans-Caucasus of jihadist movement, and even an international jihadist movement. If we take a look to the south in Syria and in Iraq, where ISIS has established a bit of a foothold, if they continue to maintain that foothold and part of the Al-Qaeda franchise or an Al-Qaeda spinoff really uses that as a base for international terrorism, this area could be vulnerable, Western Europe could be vulnerable, and we could be vulnerable.
Right, and this is all that we have spoken with in the past as we've been watching the conflict unfold over there in the Ukraine area. Now, we also want to talk with you as an aviation expert, Mr. Sanchez. Talk to us about, we've already heard that Delta is deciding not to fly over these very volatile areas. But what are the chances that airlines would stop flying over areas when obviously, they've got to have a bottom line here?
Right. I mean, each airline is going to make their own calculation about how important that's going to be for them. I think for whatever reason, Malaysia Airlines have made a determination that it was an acceptable framework of risk for them to keep flying over Ukraine, despite the fact you had national aviation authorities around the world saying, avoid this area. As of right now, from my understanding, the FAA is absolutely forbidding any U.S. carriers from flying over these conflict areas. And I also know that at least Lufthansa in Europe, and I assume several of the other European carriers have also pledged that they're not going to fly over that region. However, eventually there's going to come a point in time when things are going to start settling down or seem like they've settled down, and airlines are going to try to resume flights over there. But I think from a commercial standpoint, if you're an individual buying a ticket on a particular airline and you have to fly across Ukraine or fly in the region, you're going to be a little gun shy about going back over there. Even if the conflict is tempered down, even if there's not an immediate threat anymore, it's just psychologically, it's anytime an airline goes down, it's very, very powerful.
Of course, when something like this happens. Now, I've been doing some research on specifically the Boeing 777, and we just showed some history of this type of aircraft. This one is actually called an extended range plane. It's been referred to as a pilot's dream plane because it can do these long 11.5-hour flights like the one it was doing today. In something like this, would there have been really anything that a pilot could have done in a situation like this?
Absolutely not. I mean, the Boeing 777 is a very sophisticated plane. It's very safe. It's state of the art. But these are commercial jetliners. They're not built to evade missiles. They're not built to enter into combat areas. And I mean, that seems very intuitive to us, I think, but also if you look at international law, which is one of the areas I'm much more vested in international aviation as far as expertise. I mean, international law has a customary rule that there's absolute prohibition on attacking civilian airline. Even if aircraft drift off course, even if they do enter into forbidden zones, countries are not entitled to shoot them down. And we rarely see it because of all the political fallout, because of all the diplomatic fallout that's going to come from this. But it's going to have, I think, major negative commercial impact, especially for Malaysian Airlines, because at least right now, is my understanding, they're going to be on the hook for the liability for this, at least the immediate liability for it.
Just an impact all around.
Right.
Aviation expert Gabriel Sanchez and Dr. Jonathon White, GVSU professor, terrorism expert, both thank you so much for being with us tonight to give us that insight.
Thank you.
And we will be, of course, staying on top of this developing situation in Ukraine throughout the next hour. And then Nightly News with Brian Williams will be a special hour-long show tonight. You can watch that show right after 24 Hour News 8 at 6.